There's a video that I've owed a longtime viewer of the channel for quite some time now. He might have mentioned it once or twice that he really wanted me to look into an Atari 8-bit game and give my opinions on it. But he was so subtle with his hints and suggestions that I almost didn't catch on to the fact that he wanted me to review this game. Anyway, it turned out to be a pretty good recommendation, because good or bad, this game has some things worth discussing about it. The game is CaveLords, and it was published by AtariMania for the Atari 8-bits in 1985. It was programmed by Peter Finzel and released on diskette for the various 8-bit consoles and computers, but only in Germany. For that reason, the game was only ever available in Dutch, and I had a hard time deciphering what I was supposed to do. And, being a fat, lazy American that I am, I wasn't going to learn a new language just to play an Atari 8-bit game. But luckily for me, I didn't have to. It's been made available in English for quite some time, and apparently the game has entered into the public domain, so it could be freely translated and ported to a variety of systems and consoles. So maybe somebody can run with that. Do I hear 7800? Anyway, let's find out if CaveLords was a great recommendation by a longtime viewer that provided me with hours of challenge and fun, or if it was simply a dud. CaveLords has sort of a unique backstory, but very little of it is actually expressed in gameplay. You are given some directions and quests to do during gameplay, in the form of a few sentences and conversations that appear in the bottom fourth of the screen. You play as Talos, who is riding his trusty winged horse, Pegasus. A king has lost his crown, and it has been broken into 3 pieces and hidden between 2 caves, guarded by the evil Nemesides, who control the very elements themselves to prevent you from restoring the king's crown. And with that, you start your adventure in CaveLords, and I must say that the story is appealing to me. It's a very 80s adventure in the names and the theming. Before starting the game, you're greeted with a nice little title screen, and you're listening to George Frederick Handel's Passipede in C major. You can select your difficulty and the number of players before beginning your adventure. And while you have the option of 2 players, it isn't really a traditional multiplayer mode. When in 2-player, one player will control Talos and thus shoot the projectiles, while the second player will control Pegasus and direct where you go. To me, it's not very fun or intuitive, but it's different. And maybe some other people will disagree with my opinions on it, but we won't focus much more on it here. Anyway, the title character, on his winged horse, reminds me a lot of the jousters from the game Joust. But there's no flapping mechanic here. You simply direct your character where you want to go, and he just goes. The button fires projectiles in whatever direction you are facing, or if you aren't pushing the joystick in any direction, it'll fire in whatever direction you were last traveling in. If I'm honest, the projectiles are pretty hard to aim, and I found the combat to be, well, frustrating overall. So much so that I actively avoid fighting the enemies. But the movement is nice and zippy, especially for a 1985 computer title. In the beginning of the game, you're instructed to speak with the king, and he informs you that his crown is of course missing. And so off you go to explore the brown, blue, and black caverns to find the pieces of the crown and return it to your liege lord. There are side quests that you'll encounter, like a dinosaur who wants you to acquire an egg for gold pieces, and a necromancer that wants a magical ring in return for exposing the last piece of the crown. As I alluded to before, CaveLords has a nice sense of adventure, and would have been a pretty decent treat for the time that it was published in, I'm sure. It's a challenge at the very least. Graphically, I quite like the look of the game. As I said, the title character of Talos reminds me of the Joust sprites, and that's not a bad thing in my eyes. The king looks less regal in my eyes and kinda derpy, but he's the exception to the graphics, not the rule. Most of the other character sprites look good, like the before-mentioned Nemesides. The Cavern Guard, Dinosaurs, and Necromancer look fine to me as well. It's weird that most of them are so much larger than Talos, but hey, we weren't concerned so much with perspective back in the day. It was more about readability and being able to decipher what things were on the screen. The blue water flows nicely in the caverns compared to the golden brown dirt and the green plant life strewn about the cave. There does seem to be a bit of life here, with the enemies spawning out of the ether and plants dancing about on the screen. I have no complaints about the graphics. The game, well, it does what it should, and it informs the player of everything they need to know, while still being appealing to the eyes. For the most part. Ignore the king. The sound and music aren't half bad either. Some of it's a little abrasive at times, and even a bit generic, but overall, it serves its purpose. When you hit a wall, you're informed that you're doing so with a thudding sound, and enemies give a little ding when they appear out of nowhere. The flapping of Pegasus's wings is also nicely done, and that's a godsend because you'll hear that sound non-stop while you play the game. It's a shame that the music doesn't play in the background the whole time that you're going through the adventure, but that sort of thing would have been intrusive, honestly. CaveLords is one of the rare cases where I feel the silence and the flapping of the wings really adds to the depth of the game itself. You're in a lonely, echoing cave, so each sound really means something when you hear it. The gameplay, unfortunately, is where my praise stops for CaveLords. I don't think it's a bad game, but there's just too many elements that are left completely to chance, and it makes for a frustrating time in my opinion. The Nemesides spawning, the items being randomly generated and laid about the levels, the lightning bolts coming down and hitting your winged horse, and the volcanic eruptions below you all seem to happen at random. It really makes you feel like you have little control over the adventure. In theory, the randomly placed items should give a lot of replay value, but ultimately they're in the same general area every time. At least the important items are, like the crown pieces, the dinosaur egg, the wand, and the magical ring. You can also pick up gold for bribing the cave guard to let you pass the gate, additional armor to allow you to sustain and survive more damage, and some detrimental item that looks like, it looks like a turd to me, but I honestly don't know what it really is. Add in the vines and plant life that either slow you down or send you sliding backwards, and you have an inconsistent game that will probably get on your nerves before you see the very end of it. At least it did for me. CaveLords was really going for something though, and I feel like it almost accomplished it. I can see why a longtime viewer of the channel, Ramey Butler, enjoys it so much. Had I discovered the game at a different time in my life, I probably would be singing its praises to this very day, and I would probably call it a cult classic. But it just feels too unfair to me a lot of the time. Again, with the random lightning strikes and the random volcano eruptions, I feel like I'm taking damage at no fault of my own. There's no real patterns to be found. But with all that said, I'm ready to take the game into the dark, drippy cavern known as the pros and cons section, to see whether or not it can produce a strong score. And as always, we spelunk into the pros. CaveLords is a pretty unique adventure game from the mid-'80s, and unlike a lot of its brethren, it nails the controls. You feel like you have good control over Talos and Pegasus the whole time you play. The sound is pretty good, despite the lack of music, and honestly, the lack of music helps to make this world feel like a true echoing cave. Even so, you aren't alone, and there is a nice feeling of life in the cavern at times as you progress. Speaking of progression, the game has some randomly generated elements, so each time you play, the adventure will at least be a little different. The bits of story and side quests were really cool too, and only added to the charm of the game. I also really enjoyed the graphics, and especially the color palette used. But everything isn't great in CaveLords, So let's discuss the cons. You have 3 difficulty options, but they really only seem to change the damage that you take. I could be wrong, but regardless, it didn't seem to offer the right kind of challenge in my eyes. I also found the game to be unfair, with the lightning strikes and volcano eruptions feeling unavoidable a lot of the time. The vines slowing you down is also a bit annoying, if I'm being completely honest. The combat didn't feel great either, and it was really hard to get a shot on the spawning nemesides. I just felt woefully underpowered for the whole adventure. I see what they were going for in CaveLords, but I feel like they just missed the mark. So with all that said, I'm going to give CaveLords for the Atari 8-bit computers and consoles a score of 2 one-button joysticks out of 5. I don't think I could recommend this game to everybody, but I know there will be people out there like Rami who will enjoy it despite my complaints and despite the game's flaws. And that's perfectly fine. It's more than fine, it's great. So if you're watching this video and you feel like you might want to give CaveLords a try, well, I recommend downloading it and playing it. Again, the game is in public domain, and there is an English patch version that isn't hard to track down. But I think most people could honestly skip CaveLords in today's day and age, and you won't be missing out on a whole lot. But you've heard me yap for a bit now, so now I want to hear from all of you. Have you played CaveLords before? Do you agree with my thoughts and score of the game? Do you want to see me cover a different game in the future? Just bug me for a year like Rami did, and maybe I'll look at it. Love you, Rami. Anyway, I'd like to see you guys answer these questions and leave me some game recommendations for reviews down in the comments below. And please, if you made it this far in the video, leave a like. You have no idea how much liking a video helps. And subscribe if you haven't already. We cover all things Atari, from the 2600 to the VCS 800. From the links to the My Arcade stuff and everything in between. Alright guys, it's time to wrap up this little adventure. I've been the 7800 Pro Gamer, a man who rides a flying emu across abandoned mines, known as the Atari Network, and I hope you all join me again in the next video. But until then, remember to stay classy, Atarians.